All right, well, I don't know how many people expected to see this coming, but the RX 6600 was just launched from AMD, if you can't tell by all your inboxes exploding with like 6600, the new 1080p king, the new low-end graphics card, blah, 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 you know, from AMD. It kind of makes sense though, actually. It's been a long time since AMD's actually launched a card, probably because of the fact that TSMC is so backed up that it took that long for them to guarantee any sort of launch quantity. So anyway, we'll take a look at it today. We'll compare it with some of the entry-level cards from 20 series. I will put a 3060 on here as well. It's not designed to compete against the 3060, but for those that are probably gonna ask, and we'll take a look at it. So let's go ahead and let's do it.
Build Redux creates PCs for gamers who want high frame rates without breaking the bank. Through Build Redux's website, easily configure your PC and see how it's optimized for PC gaming performance. It is Build Redux's goal to create the best gaming PC for any budget without cutting corners on the gaming quality and performance. Plus, it's backed by a 2-year parts and labor warranty, so you're covered. Pick your budget, pick your games, and get Build Redux.
So the card that we were sent is the RX 6600 Fighter from Power Color. Fighter? I hardly know her. Anyway. Bad joke, but it's funny they put 1080p on the box because this is their target, right? The target is 1080p. It's still like represents something like 70% of the panel resolution out there that people are gaming on, if you look at the Steam survey. And when it comes to their charts and stuff that they send, you know, obviously we get NDA information and they always tell us like where the card is targeted and the stuff that they've enabled and what cards they compared it to. And they've really focused in on the 2060, non-super. Was there a 2060 Ti? I don't remember. Anyway, I digress. They really honed in on the 2060 because this has been, the 2060 was what NVIDIA kind of targeted their own 1060 with. And they were like, hey, look at how popular the 1060 is. The 2060 does that and brings ray tracing. And so that was their target. Pricing is one of those things it's just hard to even talk about because who knows what this card is going to launch at. To be honest, whatever the launch price is, it's going to be higher because anything you can get your hands on that's going to play games is going to command a premium. And so with that is going to come an increase in cost. So that's unfortunate. But I'll go ahead and get right down to the build quality. This is probably Power Color's like least effort, I think, in terms of just what you get. There's no lighting. There's no backplate. To be honest, this might be the dinkiest, lightest, flimsiest graphics card I've held in a long time. But at the end of the day, if it performs like it's supposed to, then that's not gonna matter. The heat pipe design, it's got 3 copper heat pipes that meet up with an aluminum cold plate. It could be copper under there, but I'm looking at the side and it looks like it's just gonna be the bare heat pipe touching the die with an aluminum cold plate in between. And then obviously it's got downfire coaxial fans, or dual axial fans here. Dual coaxial fans, that's what I'm trying to say. Connectivity is pretty standard. 3 DisplayPort, 1 HDMI, and that's about it. It is a no frills card. It is designed to like, hey, let's get a card in the public that allow people to play games at 1080p, and it can do it well. Now, in the charts, they always use smart access memory. And that's not something that I do in our test. So before you guys start writing all your comments saying, you didn't turn on smart access memory, that's not fair. I didn't turn it on the 2060 either. And the 2060 also supports it. So as long as the test methodology is fair between both cards and they go through the exact same test, the 2060 would see the same amount of uplift by using smart access memory, or whatever they're calling it, because NVIDIA enabled it in their drivers and stuff and you can turn that on. Whatever they're calling it, it's the same test. Right? So we just do out of the box settings, no overclocks, no fan profiles adjusted, just plop them on the test rig, latest drivers, clean driver installs, 1440p and 1080p. Because we called the 2060 a great 1440p card. Obviously this is like 3 years old now at this point, or close to 3 years old anyway. I figured it to be fair to see how the 6600 does as well. Now it's funny, the cards that we're gonna compare it to today, before we get into the charts, 6600 and 6600 XT. I wanna see how much gap there is between these two cards because the 6600 and the XT are there's quite a gap between the two. So that means, is something gonna slide in there from NVIDIA? Are we gonna continue to have this leapfrog effect where you don't have any two cards that are directly comparable between AMD and Intel or NVIDIA? So That's why I put the 6600 XT on there. I also included the 2060 because I want to see how it compares based on AMD's keynote that they had with us on, or press day that they had with us on how it compares to 2060, and apparently it's kicking its butt. And then I want to compare it to 3060 because that just shows the generational improvement, and that's the lowest end 30 series card that there is right now. Remember, there is no 3050 and there is no 1660 successor yet. So with that said, those are the 4 cards on the chart. Let's see how they compare with our test suite, which has all sorts of different engines and stuff in it. So let's get right to it. So if there's a moral to the story, it's don't let the build quality fool you. This thing right here might have about the ingenuity of a flip-flop when it comes to just, and when I'm talking about like flip-flop versus like a Yeezy or something. I don't know, I don't do shoes, right? But anyway, it's so beyond basic. But as you can see, the core itself is just pretty much mopping the floor with the 2060. And this exact FE card, which remember, the FE cards, this particular card does have an increased boost clock and all that sort of stuff versus reference. So this is technically a little bit faster than probably what this would be compared to some of the other brands out there. I feel like this is gonna be one of, if not the slowest 6600 out there. And it took on and beat the 2060. Obviously, it doesn't beat the 3060, and it obviously doesn't beat the 6600 XT because that's not how hierarchy works in terms of naming. But it does a great job. And at 1440p, quite a few of those titles are very playable. Remember, we test everything with max settings. I show you guys what the worst case scenario is. So if you go, well, I don't play things at max settings, then know it's gonna be higher than what we showed you, which is a good thing. 60 FPS target at 1440p was definitely doable in almost every single one of our titles. A couple of the more demanding newer titles, depending on the tech that's turned on, like badass settings on Borderlands, right? It's down into the 40s for 1440p, but that's expected. If you drop it down to say high, then you get over 100 FPS in 1080p, and you get like 80 FPS in 1440. And we all know that like the difference between high and the settings above that typically are a huge diminishing returns on the fidelity increase and the sharpness and the things that you're noticing. Especially in a title like that, it already has like a Sin City, like a filter on top to look like a comic book, and then you move it around in a first-person shooter so much, you're not gonna stop and be like, I don't know, man, I can't see the individual fuzzy hairs on that leaf right there. So you play it high, you're not gonna notice most of that crap anyway. In fact, our Hardware Unboxed did a pretty good video about the drawbacks of going highest settings and why they're dumb. Highest settings honestly are probably there just for screenshots and stuff. But the 6600, as long as, you know, you can buy one, It seems like a pretty great card. And I feel like it's a card that exists right now in a time when manufacturers are like, let's just get something out. Let's try and get as much as we can into the wild so people can start playing their games. And if you've got a graphics, if you're sitting there on like a 1030 or a 710 or something like that, you, trust me, you would take this card in a heartbeat because you can play games at the high resolutions or 1080p, 1440p at high settings without a problem whatsoever. This is probably the biggest lesson in don't judge a book by its cover. Because if I were to just look at this, I'm telling you right now, I like Power Color. We've tested a lot of the Red Devil cards and stuff, which is like their top tier. And this is the opposite end of that spectrum. This is like pretty entry level. I would have looked at this and I would have been like, it's gonna be garbage based on the build quality and how it feels. But obviously, as you guys can see, it did perfectly fine. As much as this has like the super premium, like robust, feels like a cinder block level of build quality, it doesn't matter because the 6600 beats it. So there you go, guys. Thanks for watching another graphics card review. It feels weird to do at this point, but nonetheless, we got to do it because if you guys are like, should I buy it? It's our job to tell you how we feel about it and show you our results. There you go. Are you gonna buy one? Are you gonna try? Is it worth your time? Are you gonna still try and get a higher tier card? Or are you just gonna literally buy any potato that might come along that can play games? Sound off in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Action. Well, what?